Okay, fellow classmates, so with the Unit 5 discussion, where we are supposed to talk about different data types such as primitives, collections, and objects, I thought I would take a different approach and discuss those things within the context of R. So R is a coding language much like Python. It is known to be quite popular in the statistical realm, so if you're a statistics major in school or whatever, you probably have some experience with R. And so let me show you guys how to do or how R does some of these things. So I'm going to open up, and I've already kind of written the code. I'm opening up RStudio, which is an interface for R, just to look a little more friendlier than the actual R does by itself. And up here in the top left, we have an area where we can write a file and code and whatnot. And when we run the code with the run button, it'll actually spit it out in the console section. And for this short lecture, I can't go over all the basics, but there's a lot of other stuff that R does. But just to simply explain some of these basic data types in R, let's start out with something very simple. So doing basic math in R is very easy. I could say, okay, the variable a is equal to 1 plus 2, and I want R to run that, and then I also want R to print what a is equal to. So if I kind of highlight just these lines and click run, it'll tell me a is equal to 1 plus 2. When it prints a, it gets a value of 3. That's some very basic math in R. With R, you can do a lot of complex math. You can do, of course, statistical techniques. You can also do calculus, such as integration, differentiation. You can do matrix math or matrix algebra, where you multiply matrices together, find the Kronecker products of two matrices, so on and so forth. But moving along towards the focus of the lecture, the hashtag and then whatever after that is a comment. So here I'm going to briefly talk about some variables. Naming variables or creating variables is quite easy in R. For example, here I am saying b is equal to 3, c is equal to 8, and I could create a new variable called d, which is the division of b and c. By putting the d after that, it'll go ahead and print out the result. And so if I go run that code, tells me the result of dividing 3 by 8 is 0.375. Or as you guys may know, it's really just the fraction 3 over 8. R is also kind enough to tell you, for the variables that you have, what type of class are they? So variables can be numeric, integer-based, etc. And I just created some simple ones here, and we can run them and see what R comes up with. So the variable 4L, this kind of goes back to your algebra days, 4x plus 3 is equal to something or whatnot. The variable 4L, R defines that as an integer-based variable. And then something like 2.8, obviously it has no letters associated with it. It's just strictly a simple numeric. That's the class with which it fits into. You can also work with dates in R. There's various formats. I just picked something extremely simple. We're not really doing much with this here, but you can work with dates in various types of formats. And so it really just prints out my date there as I've specified it. But I could do other manipulations with that date if I wanted to too. But then getting into more the heart and soul of different types of data or data types for business, we have vectors. Vectors are very popular in R. Data frames are very popular in R. And so too are arrays. All three are very popular in R. And there's lists and some other things too. But vectors really are nothing more than a collection of elements that are all the same type. By all the same type, I mean if you look at my vector I've created here, vector E, it's all just numeric numbers. I don't have anything in there like 11x or anything like that. Everything is just straight numeric. They're all the same type. And so I have a simple vector here, and I can go ahead and print that vector if I want. It doesn't really accomplish much other than just printing out what we already see there. But we can in R do operations of mathematics with vectors. So I have a vector E, and let's suppose that I wanted to add 3 to every element in the vector. Well, instead of on a separate line of code doing each element by itself, 1 plus 3, and on a separate line 2 plus 3 and 3 plus 3, I could simply create my vector and then create a new variable. For example, here I just called it variable f, and I say variable f is just simply the vector E plus 3 for every element that's in it. And so if I do that and just run that, you can see we now have essentially a new vector, if you will, that is 1 plus 3, which gives us 4 for the first item, 2 plus 3, which gives us 5 for the second, and so on and so forth. Or maybe I wanted to square root everything in vector E. And I could do that. I just call that something new, G. And so it does the square root of everything. The square root of 1 is 1. The square root of 4 is 2. That's a good cross-check to see if this is working properly. And that's some simple examples of vector operations. And so maybe as I'm moving along here in the presentation, you can kind of see how in the business world, if you are a coder, if you are someone who's working with data or doing data analytics, being able to understand the basics of programming and the basics of data types so that you can manipulate the data that's in a spreadsheet or a database is quite important. So data frames in R, think of data frames as nothing more of an Excel spreadsheet. It's the columns and rows. So maybe here, for example, I'm creating a data frame with the numbers 10 through 1, 4 through 5, and perhaps also another column where I have words, hockey, football, baseball, so on and so forth. And so I can create the data frame and I can print the actual data frame too if I would like. And notice it goes through and does that. So column H is 10 through 1 going down. Notice that for column I said just 4 through 5, so it just reiterates that cycle, 4, 5, 4, 5, 4, 5, and so on. And then going down, it creates the words that I created. So you can kind of see this is R's generic version of a spreadsheet. And then the last type of data type that I wanted to talk about was an array. And we've already talked about vectors. Arrays are really nothing more than multi-dimensional vectors. So you can kind of, in some manner of speaking, think of an array as a matrix or a matrix. Perhaps you have or have not taken linear algebra, but we're really just talking about matrices here. So I'm going to create an array. In fact, I'm really creating 2 arrays here, utilizing the numbers 1 through 12. And let's go ahead and run that code and see what it generates for us, how R interprets the way I've written this. So it creates, using the numbers 1 through 12, 2 arrays with 2 rows by 3 columns. And so in the first one it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and in the second array it's 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11, 12. Once again, the coding can get much more complex. I'm just trying to show you some of the basics. But with that, I'll go ahead and conclude. My video is getting close to 9 minutes, so thank you very much. Hopefully, if nothing else, I've enticed you to want to learn a little bit more about R. If you can learn to code in Python, you can also do R. They're very comparable languages. Thank you very much.